So I'm just going to set the motivation for this session. I'll lead the refuge and the bodhicitta prayer and the short mandala offering, all in Tibetan. And then Shan will lead a short meditation. And then I will give a talk. And then after that, we'll go into the breakout groups. And then we'll have feedback and questions after that. And this week, the longer meditation, which Shan will lead, will be at the end of the session. So that will be to kind of bring things together. Okay, so in order to create a good motivation for this session, bring your mind here on your seat, in your room, at this moment, at this time in history. And think of all the surprises that we had in the last week or two with the Black Lives Matter movement, and in the last few months with the coronavirus, and connect with the feeling of uncertainty which is in the world nowadays. But of course, it's been around for a long time for many people. Acknowledging your own fears and insecurity, but also feeling in your heart the compassion for this world as it goes through these very new, challenging times. And in your heart, feel a deep connection with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And connect with your own potential to become enlightened for the benefit of all beings. And when we make the mandala offering, actually take your own world, the world that you personally live in, and transform it mentally into a pure land of bliss and emptiness, and invite the Buddha to be there and spread the teachings and the beneficial influence throughout the world in order to heal all the wounds and sickness of the people of this planet especially. Sangye chodan soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyab suchi tagi jin soki peso namki jola penchir sangye do parashog. Sangye chodan soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyab suchi tagi jin soki peso namki jola penchir sangye do parashog. Sangye chodan soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyab suchi tagi jin soki peso namki jola penchir sangye do parashog. Saji Peki Jog Shing Me Do
Just contemplate what we've just chanted together, the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. And to make this meaningful, we need to not just simply say it, not simply have it as an aspiration sometime in the future, but engage in all the steps that it will take. And it's this wish to liberate beings from suffering that's our driver, our motivator, because we know what it is to suffer. And all sentient beings are the same. It's something nobody wants. One of the reasons that there are wars, that there are conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, family conflicts, is down to self-cherishing, putting ourselves first, not thinking of others. A selfishness. And when we examine this in ourselves, we can find this wish of putting ourselves first, this instinct really to put ourselves first, is very strong. So cherishing others without discriminating, without leaving any single being out of this, is the counteracting force to bring about harmony and peace. And when we do this, we realize that we're not separate. We're all interconnected. As His Holiness was saying recently, just this week, talking about it's so important for us to see the oneness of all human beings, all sentient beings, not just human beings, but to see our interconnection and to feel a closeness. And he says intimacy not in an attached way, but in a close, connected, caring, deeply empathic feeling. To all our universal brothers and sisters, without discrimination.
So I want to begin by just reviewing the course that we've been following. Maybe you might have missed a session or two, or anyway, my memory is not very good, and maybe yours isn't either. So we started out the first session thinking about the barbarian Dharma. And this theme of barbarism, it's very ancient, of course. In the past, there were terrible things done, terrible atrocities throughout history. There's nothing new about it. And it almost looks as if it's just part of being human, that these terrible things are done. But it doesn't have to be like that. And we've got to a situation where if we continue the way we are, we could destroy ourselves completely. Probably the core of the barbarian Dharma is cruelty. And once cruelty takes hold in the human heart, then it becomes very, very dangerous. It leads you to destroy others, but you also destroy yourself. And you destroy your future lives for many, 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 many lives. It's so destructive. And the second session was on social collapse. And as the world goes through this process of fragmentation and disintegration, of course, the barbarian Dharma does take hold in many ways, in many situations, in many minds. But it's not the only thing that's happening, because in the human heart, there is a wish, not only for one's own happiness, but a compassionate, loving wish for the happiness of others. And so even when terrible things happen, there's a counterforce. The response to the murder of George Floyd has been incredible. Worldwide, so much positive feeling in support of the simple slogan, Black Lives Matter. Of course, there is some opposition to that, but it's very small by comparison with the amount of support. So, although there is a collapse underway, and it's very scary, as the little video we showed at the beginning, and that's been sent to everybody, so you can watch it if you missed it now. The destruction of the ecology and the environment, and through the climate crisis, and and then everything that goes with that, which is economic collapse, the collapse of food production, and so forth, and then the collapse of political structures and the descent into barbarism in certain states. All these things are well underway in many parts of the world. This is not news, but it's beginning to impact on the wealthier parts of the world that this could be our future. And so people in those parts of the world are beginning to get worried, seriously worried. So we need to do something about it. The question is, where are we up to? Is it too late? Have we passed the point of no return? Difficult question. Many climate scientists, they discuss this kind of issue. There was just a report came out today or yesterday, which said that we have 5 years. I mean, they keep saying those kind of things, that we have maybe 3 years or 5 years or 10 years to turn things around before it's too late. And of course, nobody can be completely sure about the date, but generally speaking, climate scientists are telling us that if we don't do something very radical with respect to carbon emissions and so forth, then we will go beyond the tipping points and we will have runaway climate change. And then we will have a very bad situation globally, which will impact all of us. Nobody will be able to find somewhere safe to hide. So therefore, the question comes up about deep adaptation. On an external level, it actually means starting to prepare for such a situation of collapse and thinking about things like food production in a local way so that one isn't dependent on global food chains and so forth, transport systems. Even, right now we're fortunate to have the internet so we can talk internationally, but there may come a time when we don't even have the internet. And we really have to function only on the local level. We don't know. We don't know what will happen. So then on the 4th session of this course, we focused mainly on meditation, on harmonizing the elements. And one of the main functions of that is to do with internal deep adaptation. It's actually that we need to bring ourselves into harmony, the elements of our own body, and with relation to our own consciousness, we need to bring ourselves to harmony. And we need to understand that we ourselves should be in harmony with the natural environment, even when we live in a society which is still very destructive. Because by developing that inner harmony, we will also generate resilience. There's the resilience of the immune system, which is very important, so looking after our own physical health. But there's also the resilience of the mind. And in that sense, we can talk about looking after our spiritual health, I guess. And that's probably why we have groups like we belong to. Many people here are connected with the FPMT, which is an international organization of centers and groups around the world. And really, one of the main functions of that is to develop inner spiritual resilience so that we will be able to manage our lives during challenging times and continue to create virtue, in other words, to engage in positive action in relation to others, and to maintain our ethical condition, and also to generate an inner mind which is stable and developing wisdom in order to see what can be done, what would be a waste of time and energy, and so forth. And of course, in particular, developing the motivation of compassionate action to bring about one's own enlightenment, but also even in the immediate sense, to do whatever we can do for our fellow beings. And then last week, we actually looked at a very particular problem which has been around for thousands of years, which is patriarchy. And it's said by many people, it was not my idea, that patriarchy in many ways is the root or source of many oppressive systems. It certainly seems to strengthen them, whether it's the root or not. Racism, colonialism, slavery, economic inequality, and general exploitation of humans, other species, and the environment in a very ruthless, sort of blind way, could be said to be a function of the sort of male supremacy energy that has pervaded cultures for thousands of years, actually, probably. But certainly it's very evident in many cultures in the world today, in different forms. And that harmonizing our own masculine and feminine, and then developing cultures around us where female and male engagement with some gender equality and balance, that would be very, very healthy for the topic that we're talking about tonight, which is the new civilization. And if you watched one or two videos I sent out, Professor Rupert Reed talks about there are three possibilities for the future. One is that we transform this civilization into something that will save humanity from disaster, if you like, and therefore protect other species in the environment. That is one possibility. And I tend to agree with him, thinks that this is highly unlikely given the geopolitical situation that we see around us. His second possibility is that social collapse and environmental collapse and so forth is underway, and that this civilization in general, when I say this civilization, I mean the kind of global civilization, is going to fall apart. We can already see that, frankly. And the recession that's coming, well, already underway, connected with the coronavirus, but many other causes, is a sign of that. So then, if you think that social collapse is probably happening and probably inevitable, then the question comes of creating a new civilization and not waiting for the end of the present civilization, but actually starting now. And if you think back over the last several decades, a lot of work has already been done towards this. So in terms of the new civilization, not only the seeds are already there, but in some respects, you know, the shoots are already coming through. So part of doing the work for the new civilization is having a sense of what kind of civilization we want to see. And then thinking about how we go about creating it, and then starting to create it, and working to create it, even while the old civilization still has power. so that there's a kind of crossover, so that as one civilization falls apart, another one is already evolving. So Rupert Reed talks about that as the second possible scenario for the future. And the third one is very negative. It's kind of total extinction. And we have to recognize that that is a possibility, that there won't be a 22nd century. It is a serious possibility. The seeds of total destruction are there. And in a way, part of the thinking that went into generating this course is feeling the need to look at that possibility, and then consider, well, let's do our best. Let's do our best to actually bring about a better future. And there's this tradition from the North American people before the white people came, of thinking of 7 generations to come when you make big decisions. And this is a very, very wise sort of approach. It represents around 200 years. And if we think about generating or creating a civilization which will be stable for at least 200 years, for 7 generations, and that our children's 7 times are going to be able to benefit from it, then this is one way to think about, well, how would that be? What would it be like? And then we can start to think about how to bring it about. So it's a practical question. It's a question of our mindset, and it's a spiritual issue, because the very deepest forces within humanity are spiritual. They're very, very powerful when you're able to, connect with them and bring them into your activism. And we all need to be activists, actually, but we need to be guided by the deepest spiritual principles. Now, the Kalachakra Tantra, which is a very sophisticated scientific system and spiritual practice methodology for personal, environmental, and social transformation. The Kalachakra Tantra speaks of a new civilization that emerges from the dissolution of the barbarian Dharma. It's quite important to recognize that this is not a new idea. It talks about a battle, and it's described in kind of ancient Indian terms of a battle with elephants and soldiers and horsemen and so on. And I think that this is simply to be taken as symbolic now. And even the phraseology of a military battle can be misleading. It seems that the way that society changes in a positive direction is not following a war. This is something that happened after the First World War and the Second World War, that there was a great sort of feeling of, oh, we must make everything work again, and we must put the economy back on its feet. But actually, the economy was run on the same principles as before. And at a certain level, nothing really changed. In fact, war, in a sense, was used in order to destroy things enough so that new markets would be created, so that the economy of growth could thrive again. We've come to the end of that story, It's not impossible that there will be a third world war, but it's not the best way forward. The best way forward is a transformation, a change that comes about through the will of people wanting that change. And there's many signs that that is possible, as well as signs in the opposite direction. The civilization which is suggested by the Kalachakra Tantra, and I'm talking really now on the spiritual lessons we can learn from it, suggest a non-oppressive culture that's beyond patriarchy and that's based on harmony of the inner and outer elements. And that indicates ecological harmony. And actually, that is the only way forward now. So this, for me, gives some suggestion of the kind of civilization that we need to create. And even as the old civilization is in a process of collapse, there are many signs across the world of this new civilization taking root. Now, personally, to contribute positively towards the creation of this new civilization, we can purify our own mind of the harmful attitudes and mentality of the old civilization. And we do this with wisdom and compassion. And by transforming our own selfishness, which is quite strong in probably most of us, transforming it into universal responsibility. His Holiness Dalai Lama said quite some time back that universal responsibility is the key to human survival. In other words, if humans carry on with a culture of selfishness, we won't survive. But if we, sufficient number of us, transform our consciousness to one of universal responsibility, then we can survive. So universal responsibility simply means that the individual puts the universal needs before their own. They take responsibility for helping to bring about the benefit of all. It's as simple as that. So how we engage practically in this process, it depends on our personal situation. There's no one way. Each of us has to find our own way to engage. It depends on our capacity, and our capacity depends on many factors, but particularly it depends on our spiritual capacity, and we're all at different levels, I guess. But also there are many other factors, such as our age and our physical capacity, but actually it's the inner capacity which is the most important. There are opportunities for positive practical engagement everywhere. There is nobody who lives in a place where there is no opportunity to do something positive. Everybody has that opportunity. And so all we need to do is to open our consciousness to the universal responsibility, and the way to engage will just appear. In fact, it will appear all the time, and there will be many, many different opportunities presented. And this is happening now. This isn't about the future. This is happening now. And as long as we stay alive and awake and open, then we will find our way to do something really useful with the rest of our lives. And that is something which we would feel good about when we come to our death, is to look back and think, I didn't waste my time. I did something useful. I made a contribution towards the positive future for the children and their children and their children and their children and so forth. So the time has come for the breakout groups, and I'd like Nitan to put you into groups of 3, and you will have 15 minutes. And the question is, what kind of new civilization do we want, and how shall we create it? What kind of new civilization do we want, and how shall we create it? And I'm just going to write that in the chat now, and then